Okay, so me and Marco for our Socratic seminar had the book Persepolis, and we're gonna get started on the first question, which is at the beginning of the book, and it is, what are her goals at the beginning of the book, and how did her goals change in the middle of to the middle of the book? And I'll just get us started. I said, like, in the beginning of the book, she really wanted to be a prophet, and she really loved God and was really worshiping God.
Yeah, I think in the beginning of the book, um, she like believed in God so much that she wanted to be a prophet so much, and she started actually seeing like a form of God or some sort of religious figure in her like while she's like in bed or in her room. And I think it shows that in the beginning she really wanted to be a prophet, I guess. Like her goal was to be a prophet.
And then like in the middle of the book, she was like she like pushed God away, like because she had like flashbacks or like not flashbacks, like pop ups of God, and she didn't really want him there. And another reason I think this is because like she didn't like God is because at the time she thought the leader, I think it was the Shah or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The leader, and she believed he was a god, and when she realized that he wasn't a god, I think she got discouraged from that and really just totally like didn't do her goals at all.
Yeah, I also think what was happening around her also changed how she was in the beginning, because on the actual page, um, it's like in the page where it happened, she was in like an emotional state where she was kind of angry, and God or this religious figure came to visit her, and this is a quote: "Shut up."
Marco, you cut out.
Oh, sorry. So, like I was saying, can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I have the actual page where she said this, where she kind of shunned away that religious figure that she would see in her room, and after this point, she kind of like put her idea of profit, like that was in the beginning, away. So on page 70, right about the middle of the book, um, she's in this like emotional state, and she's angry, and she's laying in her bed, and that religious figure comes to see her, and the religious figure says her name, which is like Maji. What seems to be the problem? That's the quote that religious figure says, and she says, "Shut up! You get out of my life. I never want to see you again. Get out." And after that, you don't see the religious figure anymore. In that page, he disappears, and throughout the book you also don't really see him anymore. So it really shows how like she wanted to be a prophet, but her dreams were kind of just crushed. um like her dreams were kind of just crushed because of what was going on in her life at the time with the war, and like it was kind of just like affecting her, and that drove her more and more away from this religious figure that she saw.
Yeah, and then she's obviously says get out in like all caps and stuff. And then on the next page, page 71,
Mm-hmm.
you can see her parents saying run to the basement, we're getting bombed, which shows that like she was kind of relying on the god, like, and she would just not, and the god wouldn't really do anything for her, and then she kind of realized that, and that he really isn't that real and stuff, and she stopped relying on him, and then like her whole world started falling apart.
Yeah, so like basically to wrap up that question was, how did she can you repeat that first question? Graham? Oh, he cut out. Hold on. Graham, can you hear me now?
You just cut out.
Yep. So can you just say the first question again so that we can wrap it up?
Uh, what are her goals at the beginning of the book, and how did her goals change in the middle of the book?
So her goal in the beginning of the book, we agreed, was that she wanted to be a prophet, right?
Uh huh.
Yeah. So throughout the beginning of the book, the war, um, or the fighting, and took place, and she kind of started driving away from like that dream or that goal of being a prophet. In the book, she says, "I want to be a prophet," and then towards the middle of the book, right up to that quote we were talking about, her dreams were kind of gone. That religious figure that she saw was gone. She shunned it away because you know, he, she didn't want to be that anymore. And I think it was her goals changed because of what was going on in her life.
Right. I agree with that.
Should we move on
So,
to question 2?
yeah, you want to go to the next question?
Yep.
Okay, so the next question is, how did the people around her shape her idea of life?
So, do you want to start this off?
Yeah. So I think like her idea of life at the time is much different from the beginning of the book to the end or to the middle of the book, because her idea of life was like kind of just like la 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 la, like being like a kid and stuff. And then she seems to realize that her whole world in Iran or Iraq, I think it was Iraq or Iran.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it was Iraq. So, anyways, her whole world is kind of falling apart, and the Iranian war is just taking over, and she can't really do anything about it. And so I think she kind of realizes that, and she sees all the protests and her family and all that stuff happening, and she just kind of falls apart, and then realizes that her idea of life is just not existable in her state of mind.
Yeah, I think that was said pretty nicely. I think her parents being who they were, especially in the beginning of the book, these protesters, these people who were fighting for what they believed in, she saw that. I remember she wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Once she drove away from not wanting to be a prophet, like we said in the first question, she wanted to be what her parents were. She wanted to be this person that would fight for the people that were rioting. She wanted to join her parents. And I think not only were her parents involved in changing how she was in life, but her uncle, I think his name
Yeah.
was Anush or something around there.
Yeah, something like that.
He told her stories like for a whole night, and it just changed the way she saw her life, like the way she saw what life was. And I think her perception of the war definitely changed, and her perception of reality changed because of the people around her. So I think
Yeah, wait.
the people around her definitely impacted her idea of what was going on.
So wait, so was her uncle on page 51? Was that the when she was describing like or when the uncle was describing like the pain and like the iron and the whip and stuff that he was getting tortured by?
What page did you say that was?
There's 51.
Let me check.
Cuz is that when he walked in the door? That's her uncle, right? Cuz I don't think it says the name.
No, that's not the uncle. So the uncle comes in. Okay, yeah. So the uncle comes in on page. I think it's way farther back.
Page before that, right?
Yeah, let me check real quick. Make sure we have the right. Yeah. So it looks like her uncle. Hold on, I'm reading right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
why you
So
do that?
on page 54 and 55, her uncle, like start either is telling her these stories, and she starts listening to him, and she's like, it's not. He is adding on to her idea of like war and like heroes in ways. Like the uncle tells her stories of like things he went through or things people around him went through, and she sees him as finally somebody who's a war hero, as because she was in this book, the kids at the time, the cool thing was to have a family member who was in prison or was in the war. And she couldn't find that with her parents because her parents were those like leaders of riots and things like that. So when her uncle came in, she got once again another figure in her life, changed her like perception, and she saw him as a leader and started telling her friends about it when he told her the stories that he had. So that was on page 55 and 54 is when she was like drawn in by his stories.
Right. And then on page 51, she also gets described by, I'm not sure, his name's Mushan. I'm not sure who he is. I think he's his dad's friend or something.
Mm-hmm.
But he describes that in prison he was whipped and he had an iron.
Oh, he cut out. Hold on. Graham, can you hear me?
But she can't.
Yeah, you cut out a little bit. You want to quickly just rephrase what you said for me?
Yeah. Yeah, wait. What did I end off on?
I don't remember, but you started off talking about the how he was getting whipped and stuff, and then
Okay. All right. So yeah, on page 51,
mhm.
his name was. Did I say his name? Wait. Let me just restart. We can cut this out. Hold on. We're gonna have to cut this out, Marco. Hold on. Wait. So on page 51, his name is Mushan. I think it's the dad's friend,
Yeah.
and he describes his time in prison, that how he was like beaten with an iron
Mhm.
or with a whip, and he was burnt with an iron. And so that probably changes her idea of life a lot more, because she wants to do something and she's drawn to want to do something, but she can't just because she's that young. And so she kind of gets in this tone of mood.
We cut out again. Yeah, so basically what he's saying is it's once again that the people around her is shaping her idea. So that's basically what he's saying here, and that this character that just joined in is kind of like.
Marco, you cut out once I stopped saying
Yeah, I
stuff.
know. I just added on to what you said, so we can. I added on to what you said real quick.
That's
Just
good, if as long as you can hear it.
yeah. So I understood what you said, and I just added on after you cut
Okay.
out.
All right.
So, if we want to move on to the next question, that's all right.
Okay. All right. So the next question for the beginning of the book is, how did education play a role in her for forming an opinion?
Okay. So yeah, I'll start this one off. I
Good.
think that especially the education of school changed. That was a direct result of the war. Um, like for instance, on page 44, um,
Right.
it was the teacher says to take all the photos out of the Shia, which is like the person that they were trying to get out because they didn't believe in him anymore, and so that in that moment, um, so in that moment she was kind of like not understanding what was going on. In this quote, she said, "But she was the one who told us that the Shia was chosen by God." So um she kind of doesn't really understand at this point why she's really getting like she's why there's the like the pages and why they're tearing out the books and why the school is already changing, and
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of just a direct cause of the war, I guess.
Yeah, and so also on 44, like, you can see how the students are stunned by this, because all they known in their life is education and school and stuff. So when they hear that the Shah is bad,
And
like,
what they've been learning about is bad.
what?
I just added on to what you said. Keep going.
Oh, my bad, you were cutting out. And so, like, that the Shah is bad, like, that's like saying what we've learned, and like that Abraham Lincoln's bad, but learning about your whole life. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it changes their idea, and it changes like their opinion on stuff. Like, oh, okay, so what I'm learning means nothing. So they end up forming their own opinions.
Yeah, right. And that's all because of like the war and how it literally in the moment that the war's happening and that there's stuff going on, that their school, their education, the things they've been learning about, the things they were told were kind of like
Just
getting.
lies.
Yeah, they were all just being erased. Like it was just like
Yeah.
ripped out of a book, literally. And
It's
that's
just
confusing for not only the main character but for her students around her who don't really know what to do.
yeah. I couldn't be like 6 or 7 and just what you've been learning about your whole life just gets erased, and you just
Right.
totally forget about it.
And so I think the school changing also changed her, the way she thought, and like it overall confused her. I feel like she was very
Right.
confused.
And it ties into the first question of how did her goals change, because once she heard that this like the Shah was bad and stuff, and she like her whole opinions changed, like, because she thought that, oh, all the gods are good and he's a god himself. And so like once she learned about this, she just stopped believing in God, and totally.
Right. All right. So that's a good wrap up for that. Let's leave that off that. So let's
All right.
move on to the like end of the book and my questions. So how do you think the main character changed from the beginning to the end of the book? So we kind of talked a little bit about this, but I want to more follow up on like how her emotions, how she was in the beginning to the very end. Like how was she in the beginning of the book, and how she was at the end of the book. So I'll start us off, and it's like I thought of it more as she was kind of like a playful kid in the beginning with beliefs of or like wanting to be like a prophet and not what her parents were, and then of course the end she doesn't know what she wants anymore, and she's just following um like what the social norms are, I guess, where she has to wear what people are saying to wear, or she gets in serious trouble. And she also is like much more serious and much more like she's not really a kid anymore. I feel like the war really changed her, or what was happening around her life really changed her.
Yeah, it changed her a lot, and it proved that like the war was so bad that they had to move out of like the country itself.
Yeah, and we'll
And
get on.
I couldn't imagine how overwhelming the emotions could have been at the time because all the stuff leading up to those events, and then just having to leave your country.
Yeah, that we're gonna move on to the question shortly,
Okay.
and I also want to add that like I said, the people around her were being just driven away from her, either by getting killed or locked up, and that would change anybody's behavior. So the main
Yeah.
character changing from the beginning to the end was she was kind of like this normal kid, and then she kind of progressed into somebody who really understood like life itself. In the beginning, she
Yeah.
kind of didn't really understand what life was, not really, but like more of how like I guess like how she thought about the world definitely changed, you know. Um, so I think I cut out, but we'll keep going as soon as Graham connects back, or I do.
You cut out.
Yeah, so I was just adding on what I said, so we can move on to the next question now.
All right. I just want to wait before we end off. Can I
Uh-huh.
say a good word?
Yeah,
So I think a good word to describe that question is that she kind of just matured. I think.
exactly. That's a very good word for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to the second question. How do you think the war affected her life? So we kind of touched a little bit on this in the last question, but we're talking about, I guess, the people around her and about how what she had, how her life in general changed. Do you want to first go?
Yeah. So I think that like if you're seeing people get killed and people getting and rioting, you're gonna want to like that's what all you're gonna learn. Like you're gonna grow up knowing that that's right and you like and it's not wrong. So
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna wanna try to like be in that crowd and trying to do what they do because that's all you know is right. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think like when the war happened, I think she was just stunned and she couldn't like understand what was wrong and what was right.
Right.
She was just kind of just going with whatever, and there was so much violence. There was no really wrong and right, so
Mm-hmm.
she was just confused.
Yeah, and the overall way she ran her life, she had to, excuse me, be in secret about like what her family does. I remember that her family had to hide what they were doing on some nights because it wasn't what the social norm was. They would get in trouble if their neighbors saw their family doing that. The way she dressed, the way the music she liked, everything like that, the board games she liked to play, it was all forbidden. So her childhood life was affected. So how do you think the war affected her life? Her childhood life was kind of taken away from her, and she kind of
Yeah,
had to mature.
yeah. She had to mature at a young age, especially like the middle ages, like 8 or 7. Because I
Right.
think ended off at like how old was she when she ended off?
I'm
I think
vividly
she,
remembering.
yeah. So she was at 6 in the beginning. I know
Hmm.
that. I think so. She had to go from 6 to like I think it was like 19 or 20 or 18,
Hmm.
and in like a short time period of just absolute war.
Right.
So that does a lot and makes you mature much faster than someone who's just living in a suburban town.
Right. It affects you. It affected her, and that's what
Yeah.
the war kind of did to her. All right, so I think that's a good wrap up for that question. Let's move on to the final question. How do you think the very end of the book, where she leaves, concludes the book? You want me to start off on this?
Yeah. Sure.
All right, so in the end of the book, she has to leave because it's just getting too much for her and for the people around her. Like at this point in the book, the bombing and the war is getting too close to home for her parents to like. So she has to leave, and she has to put everybody she loves behind her and moved to the U.S. And in the final scene where her mom collapsed from just sadness and seeing her girl that they've went through so much and now they're leaving, it concludes the books and just like it leaves it off on a certain tone and note that I think the author wrapped up the book pretty nicely, where it was kind of like you don't know what's going to happen, but you know that it was so bad that she had to leave her home, and that it affected her and her parents like drastically, her leaving like that.
Yeah. Wait, did she travel back to the U.S. or was it Europe? I thought it was Europe.
Oh, it might have been Europe.
I don't know, something like she
I'll
obviously.
I'll find it real quick. Hold on. I can
But
really
why do
quickly
you do that? So I think that like what was I was gonna say. I was sorry, I was busy on that.
That's okay. Take your time. I gotta find this.
Like so like the end of the book, right? Like she had to travel from somewhere else, so that kind of like sets the tone of the overall mood. Like it's the war was so bad, life was so bad, they had to move somewhere else because that it was that bad. I think that's like a huge theme of the book.
Yeah,
It was
that
that
it
bad.
just it affect a war and like it affects a child or a person so much. And you're right, but I think it says your mother and I are having to decide to send you to Austria.
Uh-huh.
And she's like she doesn't really understand after kind of all this why she has to leave. And the parent says first of all because it's easier to get Austrian visa, and second why best friend lives in Vienna. Do you remember her? Zozo, Sharon's mom. So it's kind of like it's wrapping up the book. Like the character had this main character who's gone through so much has to now leave her parents behind because her parents aren't coming with her. Has to leave her parents behind to like move on with her life. And her parents will most likely they say they'll join her in a few months but have things to wrap up. But we don't know what's gonna happen. So it's just like it's ending off on like I would say like a cliffhanger kind
Yeah.
of. Like we don't know what's gonna happen next to her and it leads to a new book, I guess.
Yeah, it's like overwhelming for a reader.
Yeah,
Because
like you read this book. You're right. You read this book and you go through it all, and then all of a sudden, she has to leave now.
yeah.
Right.
And I think like you living because she lived in this war the whole time while she was there.
Right.
That's her whole childhood. Her whole childhood, she was living in fear, and like that does a lot to a person. And I
Yeah.
think just leaving it all does even more to a person, especially the only people you loved and knew, like just leaving them.
Right. And that it's just overall change that happened. And then to finally wrap up this question, how do you think the very end of the book, where she leaves, concludes the book? So we both kind of agree that it concludes the book in leaving the book in a cliffhanger and wrapping up the story or this chapter of her life.
Right.
This chapter from the beginning to the end of the book was her life at the start and her life at the end of the book, and then maybe foreshadow what's going to happen next.
It sets the tone.
Yeah, it sets the tone maybe for the next book that there is, which there is a second book that came
Yeah.
out. So maybe it's about her in the Austria and
Yeah.
how life is there. So that is our Socratic seminar. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. All right.
Bye.
Bye.